What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Mets Central podcast, the first one of 2025, as we have not uploaded in the past 2 weeks. Life happens, and then with football over the past few weekends, it's been a little bit harder to, of course, do these on Sundays, but we are back doing a live episode here, as there's not really been a lot of news, unfortunately, either, so that goes in hand with why we haven't been in a rush to really get another episode out. The Mets have acquired a couple players to bolster the system. They acquired some depth pieces, but that's really about it. Outside of that, a standstill with Pete Alonso still. There's rumors potentially with Vlad Guerrero Jr. that dropped today. And then, of course, the long-awaited news with Roki Sasaki. We kind of got an answer on that one without it being official, but we're going to discuss it all. Before we jump into everything, leave a like on your way into the live stream if you're tuning in live. If you're watching on replay, leave a like either way. Subscribe if you guys are new to the channel, especially if you're Mets fans. Turn on your notifications so you know when we upload or go live. But how are we feeling about this offseason as we are very quickly approaching the start of pitchers and catchers and spring training, which I am excited for?
Yeah, no, first of all, to everyone who's watching and to you, Evan, Happy New Year, because like you said, this is the first podcast and first video that we've done on the channel since the turn of the new year into 2025. And yeah, I mean, listen, spring training's coming soon, pitchers and catchers coming soon. I'm pretty sure we're now under 30 days till pitchers and catchers, so you know it's starting to ramp up now a bit. There's still a couple holes, that Stearns and Cohen need to fill on the roster, but ultimately, I'm feeling pretty good about the offseason. Obviously, they landed the big fish in Juan Soto, which we all love. They brought back Minaya. They brought in Holmes, Montas. They still need a couple more depth bats in terms of DH. Obviously, we'll talk about what's going on with Pete and the contract offers that the Mets and him and Boris offered to the Mets as well. So yeah, it's coming down to the nitty gritty, and it's almost about that time to get excited for spring training ball, which I'm hyped about it, and it can't come soon enough for me personally.
Yeah, it's just weird right now with the off season because it just things were moving so quickly, and now we've just hit like a wall. The biggest signing over the past few days has probably been Jeff Hoffman, and that's really about it. Which he also is failing physicals. There's still so much talent on the board, it's crazy. So as much as Met fans are freaking out about the roster right now, there's still so much work that could be done this off season, and they'll end up working their way with that, but. We'll start off probably with the Sasaki thing, since I think that's the biggest topic, honestly, outside of Alonso. And, some of the international signings, since it goes hand in hand, as the Mets signed Elian Pena today, a shortstop from the DR. And he pretty much sucked up most of the international money, as well as the fact that they signed up a bunch of international free agents. I'm not even going to list all the names because there's so many of them, but I have the list pulled up right in front of me. There's a pitcher that here, center fielder, outfielder, pitcher, shortstop, second baseman, shortstop, catcher, and the common theme here is they all play similar positions, and I cannot understand why Met fans are losing their minds over Pena getting the money he is and the signing just because he plays shortstop, and everyone's like, well, we have Lindor. Well, first of all, Lindor's not going to be here forever. Second of all, I don't know how many times it has to be said, the best prospects are guys that were up the middle. Mark Vientos came through as a shortstop. Jacob deGrom was a shortstop at one point. Jet Williams, shortstop, but looking like maybe he's going to be a second baseman or an outfielder as he's climbing up the rankings. And I could go on and list all these guys. Brett Beatty, even at some point, I think, was a shortstop. I could be wrong there, but either way, the best guys are up the middle because they are the most athletic and they are playing premium positions. That's no exception to Pena. Just because he's playing there right now doesn't mean he's going to be a third baseman in a couple of years, or maybe he's a second baseman. Maybe he goes to the outfield. It does not matter. I mean, Tatis came up as a shortstop. Now he's a right fielder. So it really doesn't matter the positioning there. I'm excited for him, especially because that pretty much put the nail on the coffin here for what we all already knew, that Roki Sasaki was not going to come here, which it looks like he prefers a smaller market. I have a feeling he's going to go to the Dodgers just because he's not going to really have the bright lights on him as much, because he's going to be under the radar with the amount of talent they have on that roster. I could be wrong there, but either way, I'm excited about Pena, left-handed bat as well, which is of course intriguing. And I saw the comp going around about him, profiling similar to Devers, and I don't like to throw comps out just because of the fact that, in general, you're setting a bar maybe too high. But he's 5'10", weighs 167. He'll put on some muscle, and he already has a lot of power to begin with. As if you look at the prospect rankings and stuff, and you look at the MLB pipeline grading, his power is already graded at a 50 at 17 years old, which that makes me sick that he was born in 2007. But either way, the power is sick. He's got a good hit tool. I'm excited for this, and I think he could be a really good left-handed bat. And people are saying he might be up within 3 to 5 years, which also gets me excited. But what were your thoughts on that? And then, of course, some thoughts with Sasaki.
Yeah, I like this signing. The biggest international free agent signing I think in history of the MLB, $5 million with the signing bonus, and yeah, he's a little exciting, talented player. I mean, listen, I get the concerns that people were having, where like saying, "Oh, it's another shortstop, it's another shortstop, what another shortstop?" But to me, it's like, why not? When you're going after these guys, you need to go get the best available talent. And if the guy's a shortstop, then so be it. Because listen, like you said, Lindor's not going to be here forever. And again, like also you said, like not all these guys that come up as shortstops, when they come up to the MLB, they stay at shortstops. They either move to the outfield, like we see with Jet Williams, or they move to third base, they move to second base, things like that. So it's all about versatility. And listen, if Pena comes up and he's a shortstop, and eventually a couple years later Lindor has to slide over to third base, maybe, then cool, so be it. Because you know what, he's going to be a top end talent if he does break through here in 3 to 5 years. If his potential is what they say it is. And I was watching a little bit a video that the Mets posted on their YouTube channel, and they were basically saying, how scouts view him as like a five-tool player, has a very good plate discipline at the plate, hits the ball hard as a lefty, which all attributes you want in a young player coming over from the international market. So yeah, I love the signing. And also, I was gonna mention, like, with people like freaking out over, that he's a shortstop against. Like, listen, he might be a valuable trade chip as well down the line. Rumors are circulating that the Mets are looking at Vladimir Guerrero Jr. And you know what? Pena might be a very good player down the line, but if he is one of the guys that needs to be included in a type of deal like that to get a big time bat like a Vlad Jr., then you know what? You do that all day, because now you just got to stockpile these type of guys, because one, they might either come up and flourish, or two, like I said, you use them as trade bait. Now with moving on to Sasaki, yeah, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. I think it was always a pipe dream. We heard the rumors that he liked the Mets pitching lab, he liked Jeremy Hefner, but I didn't really buy into all that. I'm like, listen, most likely that he was going to go out west and either sign with the Dodgers or the Padres, and those are my two that I think he's going to sign with. I know Jeff Passan talked about that the Blue Jays are one of the teams I'm interested in him. I don't see him going to the Blue Jays personally. I think he's either going to go into the Dodgers, where he'll team up with his Japanese teammates in Yamamoto and Otani, or he'll go to San Diego again in California, and he'll play with this guy Yu Darvish. So yeah, listen, it would have been nice to get a guy like Sasaki. Obviously, I think Stearns mentioned before that, if the Mets did get Sasaki, it would have been viewed as a bonus to the rotation. So now it pretty much looks like that the Mets are done with the rotation, unless there's some magical mystery move that's going to, come out of nowhere that they pull off. But yeah, like I said, with Sasaki, it would have been nice, but I had a feeling all along that he probably wasn't coming here. And yeah, and now he's probably either going to the Dodgers or the Padres. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm really excited with the idea with Pena in terms of, what he could be down the road. And that's the other thing. I mean, we talk about all the time how Steve Cohen brought up the East Coast Dodgers thing, and I know he said he's regretted saying it, but it is something that he said, and he's going to have to live with it now. This is something the Dodgers do. They get the farm filled with prospects, and then all of a sudden they have every prospect imaginable available to trade. Like, think about when they got Trey Turner and Max Scherzer, how highly rated those prospects were. And, obviously they haven't really panned out that well for the Nationals, most of them, but either way, the point remains that these were highly coveted prospects, and you need to fill your system with these guys in order to acquire big time players. So I can't understand the whole complaining about filling up the farm just because of guys on the current team playing the position these guys do, which it just makes no sense to me. This isn't like hockey where, you draft guys and they're going to be over in like 2 to 3 years, and it could impact the immediate roster, and it's a hard cap sport and everything. It's not like basketball either, where, you have guys signed to contracts where it could really affect where these guys are playing in limited roster spots. There's so much roster flexibility in spots with the MLB. That goes without saying, but yeah, I'm excited about what he could be. And honestly, I thought the Mets already had Pena, because I remember hearing about him like a year ago at this point, the Mets being linked to him, that I thought they already had him. I'm not even lying about that. So I was a little confused when they signed him. I'm like, I thought they already had him, but yeah, I think that he's going to be sick for the Mets, and he's probably going to be a top 10 prospect already for this organization, which is really exciting as well. So I just can't understand the complaint about signing a top 10 prospect. But do you have any final thoughts about Pena before we talk about Sasaki a bit more in the pitching?
No, I can move on.
Yeah, which we will discuss now, Roki Sasaki a little bit more, because like we said, looking like he's going to sign elsewhere, unfortunately. And I'm not sure where the Mets go now, because I don't know if they're going to pivot or not. I feel like I don't know. I feel like they're not going to pivot, and I feel like they're going to keep what they have here and just see what it is. And fans aren't going to like it, but I get this vibe that the rotation's going to be Senga, Manaea, Montas, Peterson, Holmes, and then whoever wins that sixth spot. Fans aren't going to like it, but it's the truth. And do you agree with that, or do you think there's a pivot option here that they'll go with?
There might be a pivot, but I don't think it's likely. I think this rotation stays the same as it is right now until we get to the trade deadline. And then we see maybe if there's a starter that comes up on the market where, a team is struggling and they're just looking to dump them, and, the Mets with their with a couple of prospects that they might be looking to ship in, like guys like Jet Williams or, Acuna, or if they want to move him, Mauricio, if, he's still having a little bit of health concerns here and there. So yeah, I think that's the plan for now. And listen, on paper, like you said, it's not pretty. It's not the most sexy with the name wise. I mean, like, listen, I'm not too excited about David Peterson being the potential 3 starter on the team going into opening day. That's a little, shaky here and there, but I'm confident in Manaea. I think, not saying that he's going to be the same dominant pitcher that we saw in the second half, but I think he'll put up similar results to what we saw last year. Senga, I'm confident if he can stay healthy, he'll be the pitcher that we saw in 2023. It's just, again, it's about the health and whether, nothing else bad happens in that arm, or, anywhere else down in his body where potential major injuries could happen. And then Holmes and Montas are the 2 guys that you're banking on to um to work out on these short-term deals, similar to what we saw with Manaea and Severino last year. And I kind of can't lie. I think the more and more I think about it, and the more and more I watch some highlights of him, the more I'm starting to get more excited about Clay Holmes. Like, I really do think that there's something there that they can convert into a starter. I mean, we've seen other teams do it in years prior with, the Padres doing it with Seth Lugo, and then the Royals ended up signing him, and, he ended up being a top 3 pitcher in the Cy Young Cy Young race last year. We saw, the Padres that did it last year with Michael King, and he looked like, and, he had a breakout season last year. So I do think there's value in Clay Holmes, and obviously he does have to add another pitch there, because a 3 pitch mix as a starter isn't, you're not going to last well. And, there obviously is the concerns with, him, with him transitioning from leader to starter, that, his endurance might not be there, his arm might not be there. But with the Mets running a 6-man rotation, I'm more confident on that, just because, he's gonna have a bit more time to rest up and, get ready for his next start, as opposed to, them just running a 5-man rotation. And then also, it might also show you that the Mets are confident in Brandon Sproat, and they might be thinking, that maybe he might not start the year off in the majors, but, maybe come late May, early June, if he's really dominating down there in AAA and he has a strong spring training, he might be a serious candidate to come up. And then, we'll see what happens from there, because then, the Mets could then call up Sproat to a rotation that's already firing all cylinders. And then they come around to the trade deadline. There's another big starting pitcher out there. And then boom, you add another big time ace caliber pitcher. And now you have a really set, solid rotation going into the second half of the year and, going down the stretch and into the playoffs. So yeah, like I said, as of currently constructed, not the most sexiest rotation, but I think it will be decent enough just to get their trade deadline. And then, we'll go from there to see, what they do with in terms of trade wise.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think that at this point, like this is what it's gonna be. Although I have a take that might get me put on a public you know what. It starts with an H. I'm not gonna say it on YouTube, but I have a take of a guy they could potentially sign that maybe if they want to add a little more stability. Do you know who I'm thinking of?
Give me a give me a hint.
He was a Met.
Oh, is it Scherzer?
No, it's
No.
Quintana.
Oh,
Running it back with Q.
oh,
I I don't love the idea, but if they really want to add more stability, I could see a world where it happens just because I don't see his market being that significant. And I think that they can maybe get him for like 10 million, maybe less on 1 year. And it's just like, fuck it. Let's just run it back. Just a stable arm. I'm not in favor of it. I want to make it very clear that I am completely against it and I would rather just run with what they have right now. But I'm just throwing a name out there for what I think could potentially happen because I just don't see them acquiring the big time starter that fans think. I know that there was a rumor recently with Flaherty how his market's starting to come down and he might take a short-term high AV deal, and I'm against that too. I'm not in favor of Jack Flaherty. I think there's a lot of issues there with him, and I don't think he would thrive well really in New York either, so I would rather stay away from that. I agree with you though with Holmes entirely. I think Holmes is going to surprise people because he profiles so similarly to Michael King when King switched over from a reliever to a starter. And I think that it might be crazy, but you know what? I wish Joey D was here to give him an ice cold take. I'm going to give a hot take, a Joey D ice cold take, whatever you want to say. I think Clay Holmes is going to end up being the best starter in this rotation. I do. I think that when you look at what Michael King did, and I'm not saying it's going to come right away for him, but I do think that what I think will happen is I think we're going to see him have a rough April. Fans are going to beg for him to go in the bullpen. The Mets are going to run with him as a starter for longer. He might not finish with the best numbers, but I feel like from midway in May on to the rest of the season, I think he's going to be the best starter in this rotation because I think he's got the stuff to end up being that type of guy. Do I worry still about fatigue? Yeah, I definitely do, especially down the stretch, especially because we saw this with Manaea this past year, and, he's a guy that has been starting for a bit, although he did go to the bullpen with the Giants for a bit, but nonetheless, a guy that was starting a lot. We saw with Severino, but he was dealing with injuries. There will be fatigue at the end, but I think from midway May, if they could utilize him right in the early months too, that would help. But I think he's going to be the best pitcher for this rotation.
Yeah, I don't think necessarily I mean, listen, could he have a slow April and could he get hit around? Sure, but I think the more likely thing that we see from him is like what we saw with Manaea in early April or early May, where he doesn't necessarily give up a lot of runs, but his pitch counts are up high in games. He's working the counts up high a lot, and then he comes out after 3 or 4 innings, and then we're all like saying, "Oh, here we go again." Holmes with another short start. We're running the bullpen into the ground, but I think it is like the thing, like I mentioned before, where instead of like last year, like what the Mets were doing, where they ran a 5-man rotation. This year for the most part, it's going to be a 6-man rotation. So Holmes is going to have a couple of extra rests in between starts. So sure, maybe we might see a couple of starts early on in the season where he only goes 3 or 4 innings, but I expect that durability and that consistency, and and that stamina to build up throughout the years to maybe where he'll go, 6 and then maybe, 7 innings by the end of the season consistently, which is what we saw with Mania last year after he made that arm angle adjustment. But yeah, I think also the other thing that I like with Clay Holmes is just his pitch mix because when you're watching his highlights last year from when he was coming out of the bullpen with the Yankees, I mean that three pitch mix of that slider, that sweeper, and that sinker. When Clay Holmes is on his game, he's unhittable. He is. But it is though, when he does lose control of that sinker, it can, quickly derail for him. But I think, especially last year, going down the stretch and in the playoffs when the Yankees did move him out of that closer role and they replaced him with Luke Weaver and Clay Holmes became the eighth inning setup guy with a lot less pressure on him, he pitched a lot better. And I think now as a starter, you're not coming into those high jam situations where you got to get 3 outs in a row consistently, boom, 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 in high pressure situations. So I think now as a starter, it's going to be a lot less pressure. He's not going to be mostly relied on as that big time pitcher. So I think early on in the season, he could just settle in nicely and just get into that groove, and then hopefully and then like I said, we see the fourth pitch coming in, which I would assume is probably a fastball because that's probably the easiest pitch to throw in there for a 4 pitch mix, but. Yeah, like you said, like I said, I am genuinely excited to watch Clay Holmes pitch. Even though I was skeptical of the signing originally as a starter, I was all for it as a bullpen wise, but as a starter, I was like, I'm not so sure. But like I said, the more and more I think about it, the more and more I'm intrigued about him as a starter.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. Especially because I was on here yelling, screaming, and pissed off about them not getting a more sure bet than Clay Holmes. But when I just look at what Michael King did, I'm not saying they're gonna get that production. Which if they do, if they get the production that the Padres got from Michael King this past season, then this is a successful signing, and he's the best pitcher on the staff, unless Kodai Senga's what he was in 2023. And if we're having that conversation, then all of a sudden this team has a scary rotation because you'd have those two thriving, and then Manai is all of a sudden the 3 starter, and that's a very good 3 star to have. And I agree with you with the 4 seam idea, but I do wonder, just because looking at King, which it's a little hard to argue just because there's a little bit more of a foundation with King because he was throwing a changeup more consistently throughout his career. I really wonder if they try to have Clay Holmes develop a changeup as well, because if you just look at the way that Michael King was able to tunnel that sinker with his changeup, it made it so effective and it caused him to get so much swing and miss stuff. If you could get him to add that and the 4 seam, and all of a sudden he has a 5 pitch mix, Clay Holmes could profile pretty much exactly to King. But the problem is, I don't know if they're gonna go in that direction just because of the fact that he hasn't thrown a changeup, just looking at Baseball Savant, since 2019. So that's a very long time, and even then he only used it like once or twice. So there's really not a lot of a foundation there, but he has all off season to work on it, where if he does and he could develop that as his secondary pitch to mix with his sinker, I think that all of a sudden could really open up the door of possibilities of how good he could be for the starting pitching staff.
Yeah, I agree with it. I mean, if he can incorporate both a fastball and a changeup into his repertoire, and that becomes a 5 pitch pitcher, then listen, that's even better for us. But I do think that in in the start of spring training, I do think they'll implement the fastball first, just because I think that's the easier pitch to ease into your repertoire. I do think the changeup might be one of those pitches that we see later down the line that he gets involved in his repertoire, just because like you said, he hasn't thrown one consistently since like 2018, 2019. So you don't just want to throw it out there and then it gets hit early on in the season, and then you're like, do I really want to rely on this pitch a lot? So I do think that I think we'll see the fastball at the start of the season, and that will be his 4 pitch repertoire. And then if he gets confidence that's in that changeup and he works on it in the pitching lab and in spring training, then I do think we see that pitch come out later in the season as like that secret weapon, like you said, like with Michael King did, and how he used that sinker changeup thing to get a lot more swings and misses. But yeah, it's also like you said, like not necessarily that Clay Holmes is going to be Michael King, but if you could get any kind of production anywhere near what Michael King did last year, then again, like that's a terrific sign for the Mets and for the starting rotation.
Yeah, 100%. Which, with that being said, we'll talk about the bullpen a bit just because there was a little bit of a rumor tied to the bullpen with Tanner Scott and the Mets apparently keeping tabs on him. And I'm just going to sit here and say it right now. I don't think there's any, I believe there's truth to checking in on him. I think it was nothing more than a, hey, how much do you want? And a, yeah, goodbye after he tells them north of 15 million per season, because I just don't see a world where David Stearns, nonetheless, of all people, gives 15 million to a reliever when Edwin Diaz is already making the money he is. And to me, it doesn't make sense either. And Tanner Scott is freaking great, but I've stood on this stance. You've agreed with me on this, that they are going to build this bullpen from within, and they will add at most one or two free agents. And the reliever market's slow anyway. There's a lot of guys left. I get the appeal to adding a lefty, but I agree. I stand by what I said a couple months ago. Bring back David Robertson. He could get lefties out. If you want to sign someone else in free agency, I'd love a guy like Tommy Kahnle on a 1-year deal. Brooks Raley, I'd welcome him back with open arms. But there's still so many guys on the market that I think get 1-year deals, to where why does it make sense to go out and bring in Tanner Scott, especially because I tweeted this the other day too. Let's logistically think for a second. So if Tanner Scott's going to get 20 million, why would the Mets refuse to go north of 20 million on a starting pitcher this offseason? Because you have to remember, Manaea, even though on paper he's making that much money, you have to remember that there's deferred money in there. So he's really making, I believe it was 17 million with the deferrals. So if they're not willing to go north of 20 on a starting pitcher, why would they go that on a relief pitcher when they already have a lot of guys from within that could fill a similar role? Which, again, I get that Tanner Scott's great, but they have Dedno Nunez and they have Reed Garrett right now who could get some big outs for them. Tyler McGill, I'd love for them to just try him in the bullpen, and I think he could get big outs. But I do think I agree with the fact that they need another high leverage arm. To me, I would rather look at Robertson, Stanek, Kahnle, or Raley coming back, sign one or two of those guys to 1-year deals worth 5 to 10 million versus pouring the eggs in the one basket on Tanner Scott on a multi-year deal nonetheless, when that is usually not a good idea. I mean, we just saw what happened with Josh Hader over in Houston. You don't pay relievers big money, but what are your thoughts on all of that?
Yeah, so when the news initially broke, that I believe it was Will Salmon of the Athletic that broke the news that the Mets were talking to Tanner Scott. I initially got excited just because it's like Tanner Scott is obviously one of the better relievers in all of baseball, right? I mean, he's not like the top reliever, but he's up top. He's probably top 5, top 4 around there. But it would have been nice to have him in this bullpen just because he's that big dominant lefty, and all of last year we talked about how the Mets really missed that big bona fide lefty in that bullpen, especially after Brooks Raley went down, and they were pretty much running out either guys like Jake Diekman, Danny Young, or Alex Young out there as their lefties. So it would have been really nice to have a lefty like that in your bullpen, and then especially then you have the tag team duo late in games of Diaz and Scott, where you know and even we talked about it, in situations where, where, you're late in a game, you're leading, and then, the top of the other orders coming up in the 8th inning, you use Diaz there, and then, you got to rely on someone for the 9th inning. Well, if you had two guys in like Scott and Diaz there, then, you could totally interchange and see, who's comfortable going up against who in that batting order. So it would have been nice, and it also would have been something that that the Mets tried to do in 2023, where they had that big tag team duo deep in the bullpen with David Robertson and Diaz. Fortunately, we didn't get to see it because Diaz had that unfortunate injury in the World Baseball Classic. But yeah, it would have been nice. But then also, like, I was also thinking to myself, I'm like, they already have Edwin Diaz in that bullpen on big time money. He's about making $20 million a year. So I'm like, depending on the contract that Tanner Scott wants, and I'm pretty sure he's going to want a 3-4 year deal with an AAV anywhere from 15 to 20 million AAV. So I'm like, at that point, and like what you brought up, if the Mets don't want to go 20 million AAV over on a starting pitch, why would they go over that type of money for a reliever? Especially when we've seen how the philosophy to build bullpens now is not by overpaying these guys on big time contracts, and not only like we see teams like the Dodgers and the Braves do that, but David Stearns did the same thing he did the same thing in Milwaukee. So yeah, like I said, it would have been nice to have a guy like Tanner Scott, big dominant lefty, but at the end of the day, financially wise and year wise, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's really just the financials for me. Like if there was a world where his market crashed down more to where he would take a shorter term deal, maybe you cave in a little more to the high AAV, but even then at that point you probably would rather just get a starting pitcher and find value there, but either that or sign a bat because you get more value there. So, yeah, it doesn't really make sense. But speaking of relievers, the New York Mets signed one, even though really just a depth signing. But they signed, or I should say, they claimed or signed. They
Yeah,
claimed,
they
I think,
claimed him off waivers.
Austin Warren off of waivers today, which there's a lot of interesting things about him in terms of the arsenal. It is a four pitch mix with a slider, a sinker, a four seam, and a cutter. He only got 10 innings of action this season with a 1.31 whip, a 1.69 ERA, which sounds good on paper until you see his FIP was a 4.48, a Ks per nine of 16.7, and then or a percentage that is, walks percentage at 11.9. In terms of the stuff that you're looking at, he really does have a good slider, grades out well. And then in terms of his other pitch mix, mostly below average, does not utilize the cutter as much as he does. I think the simple fix that you're looking at here is to up the cutter usage to maybe get a little more outs. He does not generate a lot of swing and miss stuff, but it's worth taking a flyer on. Maybe the cutter usage will help him get a little bit more swing and miss stuff. It's not going to be much, though. You're looking at a guy that will get some innings, but is not going to make a big impact on this roster. We will see what happens with him, though. The fastball is not great at all, which does pose the question of if they should maybe, switch up the way he utilizes his four seam and his sinker. Maybe switch to just using one of those pitches, and then adding in uh, maybe adding in a different pitch there. But I think the simple fix is just going to be to have the cutter usage go up, just because if you look at his AAA stuff, he was utilizing his cutter more, and it was helping him out a lot because it was grading pretty well, and it's a just above average pitch as well in AAA. So, and generating a good amount of swing and miss stuff. So again, that's what I'm looking at. But what were your thoughts on the signing there, or the claim?
Yeah, I mean, in total, it's a nice little claim where it just built depth again in terms of the pitching wise. I mean, small sample size last year, only pitched 10 and 2/3 innings, and like you said, the numbers are a bit deceiving because you look at the ERA and you look at it and say 1.69, like, oh, nice, and but then you look at the expected ERA and the FIP, 4.68, 4.48, and a 4.68 expected FIP, and you're like, he did get bailed out a lot by his defense, what the numbers are telling you, but yeah, like you said, four pitch mix, slider, sinker, four seam cutter with a 31-degree arm angle. I think, yeah, like what you said, the slider and sinker, those are his main two pitches. The slider is his best pitcher, best pitch number wise with the 211 batting average and a 202 expecting batting average. The sinker, it's okay, it's not great, 273 batting average, 294 expecting batting average. That four seamer got hit a lot. I mean, 333 batting average, 322 expecting batting average, and then the cutter was okay. I do think like they'll do like what you were saying, where I think they might just throw out the four seamer entirely, and then I think they might um introduce the cutter more into his usage. So he might be a bullpen arm where he's a three pitch pitcher with a slider, sinker, and cutter. But yeah, overall a nice little depth claim.
Yeah, there's the big thing with him is that he is a contact pitcher. So in terms of the defense behind him, it will be great because this team plays great defense. But the ERA, because the ERA will not match what his FIP will be here if he does end up getting some big outs here. But you're probably looking at a guy where it's just like, he'll pitch a couple innings and that's really it. I think he has some minor league options as well. So there's at least that to it. So it's not like they are tied to keeping him around. Worst case, you DFA him. But the thing that's very interesting to me about the cutter is the fact that the pitch shape is different in AAA versus in the major leagues, which I don't understand why that's the case, but it just simply is. If he could get it to be similar to how it is in AAA, I mean, he's going to generate a lot more swing and miss stuff, I could tell you that, but I'm not sure why it's a little bit different. He was hanging it a little bit more over the plate as well in the major leagues, which is concerning, of course. But if that's something he could fix and he could generate some swing and miss stuff there, that is going to change a lot of what you get from him. But again, I'm not expecting much here. It's a depth arm at the end of the day. But with that said, we will segue into the last conversation, which is going to pretty much be, which is replacing at this point the Juan Soto segment that we were doing every episode. You might as well call it the Pete Alonso segment now because every episode we have to talk about this guy. I'm not going to go into the ranting and the raving like I did last episode with how much it's bothering me, the games with him and Scott Boras. There was a rumor today from Andy Martino that the Mets have checked in on Vlad Jr. Is it just a simple Pete Alonso, you better fucking sign right now? Or is it legit? I don't know. Maybe it's a bit of both. But all I know is that all of a sudden, like after Martino reported it, all these insiders, if you will, started tweeting, "Oh, well, wait a second. They're gonna offer a trade package, and oh, look at this, they're accelerating in trade talks all of a sudden," which I don't get how we progress from in a matter of minutes. The Mets are making phone calls to, oh, they're putting a package together. That just, it doesn't line up with these fake insiders, which is why I always say, don't believe everything you see. I would love Vlad. I've been vocal on this podcast about it. I've been vocal about how if you want to be like the Dodgers and you want to compete with them, you go out and you pay the big bucks to get Vlad. I still stand by the fact that I would rather wait until the deadline to get him when the market drops, or I'd rather wait for free agency to give him all the money he wants to have him come in to play first base. But if there is a world where they could trade for him right now in the offseason, and there is a world where they even could get him locked up at that, I am not complaining one bit. And there is nobody off the table at that point. And that's assuming you get an extension. The problem is, of course, it's hard to assume that you're going to just because these guys are going to test the market now after they saw what Soto got. But no one's off the table in a potential Vlad Guerrero Jr. trade. I'd rather wait. That's just me because I think he's going to hit the market regardless. And it sucks because you'd ideally want him this year to help you win this year too. But it's not a guarantee you keep him, and maybe you lose all these prospects for nothing. But if Pete Alonso is going to keep playing this game of cat and mouse here and continue to play this game of, not budging on a short-term deal, then maybe you do go in that direction because I don't know if if they're as interested in Santander as we maybe believe, and I don't know really what other alternatives you have.
Yeah, this whole situation is like it's a bit weird and it's all a bit out there because I agree with what you said. Like ideally, best case scenario, you wait till free agency and then you don't have to go up any big time prospects and then you could just offer him the biggest bag and he'll sign here. But throwing this in with Pete, I mean, it is a bit weird because we did see the rumor the other day, and Jim Duquette brought this up that Scott Boras and Pete Alonso took a 3-year deal to the Mets, which you usually don't see an agent and a player taking a contract to, David Stearns and a franchise. It's usually the other way around. But it does seem to me that, Pete is a bit desperate. And it's showing me that, the Mets are the one with the position of power here, because if you're a player and you're now taking a deal to another team, it's just showing that, that you're nervous about your market. And Pete right now has no market. He doesn't. And I was kind of thinking about this, with the whole Scott Boras thing. I'm like, is this kind of a ploy to get other teams involved, to maybe offer a 5-6 year deal, to get, his market jumping a little bit. But, it's been a week now since that rumor came out and still nothing. And I look at his 2 case scenarios. Either, they offer the Mets that deal, and it's either a way ridiculous high AAV with something like around like a $45 million AAV, or with like a $37.5 million AAV, and the Mets just don't want to budge on that. Or the Mets actually do have an inkling that, because we did hear with Vladdy Jr. that, similar to like what Lindor did. Well, Lindor did it at the start of the regular season, but Vladdy's basically saying that, he's going to cut off contract extension talks right at the beginning of spring training. So there might be a little inkling from Stearns that, maybe that Vlad doesn't get an extension there then. And then when spring training starts, the Blue Jays are a bit desperate. Maybe then now you could go out there and trade for Vladdy Jr. in a big time package. So it's all interesting. I think ideally what the Mets would like to do is, because like I brought up with the 3-year deal, I think Stearns is just weighing this out. I think he potentially thinks he could get Pete on a 1-2 year deal, and now it's a really short term deal with a higher AAV. And then now, sure, like Pete might be here next season, but he'll be here for 1 year as a DH, and then you sign Vlad Jr. to that big time deal. And then also what you brought up with trading for Vlad Jr. and offering a big time deal, and talk about a possible extension being there. With the Mets, I'm kind of not worried about that, just because if they trade for him and Vlad doesn't want to sign an extension and wait till free agency, which I do think that's what he's going to do, because at this point, like you brought up with Juan Soto and what he got, Vlad, he's going to want to test the market. And it's going to be the same thing like what Kyle Tucker does with the Cubs. Even though the Cubs traded for him, Kyle Tucker is going to trade. He's going to test free agency to try and get the biggest bag out there. But with the Mets and Vlad, if that were to happen, I'm not worried, just because Steve Cohen has shown that if he really wants a guy, he'll go get it. He did it with David Stearns. He waited 2 years. He got him. He wanted Juan Soto. He offered the biggest bag out there, 765 with, and it's going to go up to 805 guaranteed in terms of millions of dollars. If the Mets trade for Vladimir Guerrero Jr., like, he'll go to free agency, but I'm very confident that the Mets would be able to retain him, just because I think at that point, Cohen would just throw him the biggest bag and whatever he wants.
That's a fair point too. And I would like to think that as well. Just that, of course, I understand, fans' concerns of giving up all these prospects and everything in the event that he could leave, because it is not a guarantee. I mean, the Yankees thought they would keep him, and I agree with you in the sense that I think that Cohen and Stearns would be able to make a better offer and pitch to Vlad versus what the Yankees, did with Soto. But nonetheless, I do understand that side of things. But yeah, the Pete Alonso thing is just driving me insane. And honestly, there's really no point in even ranting about it for the next 20 minutes, because we kind of said enough at this point in the past 2 episodes to where there's really not much more to add. And it's like, if we're just going to go back in circles to where we were a couple weeks ago, where he needs to just stop being stubborn and take the short-term deal, and it is what it is. But do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up the episode?
No, I got nothing here. We can wrap it up.
All right, well, that's going to be it for us. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, watching. Leave a like if you did enjoy. Subscribe if you guys are new to the channel. Turn on your notifications so you know when we upload or go live on the channel. And we'll see you guys in the next one.